Hello, everyone, and welcome to IRL Lore with me, your humble docent, Segovax. Today we will be looking at a text called The Debate of Cattle and Grain. Though largely framed as an argument between respectively personified sheep and wheat, the text opens with a description of how cattle and grain were formed initially, and then tells of how they were brought down to earth, where said argument occurs. And there is a remarkable shift in the tone and content of the story after Enki convinces Enlil to send the sheep and grain down from the Holy Mound, where the first part of the story takes place, and I'd like to focus on this latter part first. What follows is a pretty in-depth exploration of agriculture and animal husbandry in those days, the wealth these things bring, how they're tended, processed, and utilized. Couched in this debate, the text goes into immense detail about various implements and activities, the brewing of beer, the hardships of being an ancient shepherd, and what being a Bronze Age sheep was like. And you have to think about the intended audience for this stuff. This is like the most ancient anthropologically recorded anything that we have, and it kind of reads like a parable. The page I'm reading this from, on the electronic text corpus of Sumerian literature, doesn't say where the text was found, but I'm guessing the library of Ashurbanipal, just because it's so complete. But wherever it was found, it does seem like a Sumerian original, just having been copied and probably ended up in that library, because they're all kind of like this repetitive sort of almost Teletubby-ish kindergartner level of sophistication. Maybe this amount of repetition and review of basic reality couched in communicating these larger concepts of their progenitors and place in the world was audience appropriate for the time. And if this story survived for us to read now, there's probably more that didn't. I have to wonder if this shepherd versus farmer conflict was larger in the now lost parts of the Sumerian text corpus, and influenced the later biblical story in terms of Cain and Abel's professions. Enlil maybe disagreed with soy boy Enki, and that's why the Lord God smiled on Abel's sacrifice. The Lord God seeming more Enlilish than Enki-ish to me. I don't know. But I'm going to leave off that speculation there for some much more wild speculation about the tale at hand. So if the latter part is all about Bronze Age farming on Earth, then what's the first part about? Upon the hill of heaven and earth, as the text opens. What's that hill? This holy mound referred to in the next few lines? Whatever the case, it's where Anu made the Anuna, but made no grain, and they knew not of wearing clothes. If this holy mound is the same as this hill of heaven and earth, then line 26 removes all doubt. At that time, at the place of the gods' formation, in their own home, on the holy mound, they created sheep and grain. In these early lines, we see none of the detail of later. The holy mound has a divine banqueting chamber, but that's it. No other locations or anything else, even remotely identifiably earthling, is mentioned. None of the familiar fields or sheepfolds or anything like that. Two things we are told, however, is that first, this happened a long time ago, long before many of the things the ancient reader would have been familiar with, long before some of their gods were born, before even these lofty ones wore clothes or had agriculture themselves. And second, that it occurred, and I quote, at the place of the gods' formation in their own home on the holy mound. This isn't just a story of how we got agriculture and animal husbandry. It seems to touch on how they got them too, and possibly references how they moved past them onto ambrosia, soma, whatever you call it. It's a story that starts on their homeworld. And we can even corroborate this with the rest of the Sumero-Akkadian text corpus. There was a time that Enlil and Enki gave earthlings cows, sheep, wheat, flax, etc., and even specifically in the context of Enki convincing an otherwise reluctant Enlil to do so. It was after the flood, and they gave it along with kingship. I'm not sure if that detail appears in the Gilgamesh version of the flood story, probably the second most famous after the biblical version, but I know I've seen it before in others, and this story, here in the debate of cattle and grain, seems to be referencing these same events. So, is this a story of how we, Homo sapiens terrans, I guess, were given these things by the off-worlder Homo sapiens Nibiruans? That's for you to decide yourself. Stick around for my reading of the debate of cattle and grain. Or, if you want to just take my word for it, which Okay. Well, then, thank you for watching. Please remember to like, comment, subscribe, share. Follow me on threads at revenge_of_Harambe or at Esoteric Tangrianism on Facebook. And of course, go show your support over at my website, churchoftransphobia.com. On to the text. The debate between sheep and grain, translation. When, upon the hill of heaven and earth, On spawned the Anuna gods, since he neither spawned nor created grain with them, and since in the land he neither fashioned the yarn of Utu, the goddess of weaving, nor pegged out the loom for Uttu, with no sheep appearing, there were no numerous lambs, and with no goats, there were no numerous kids, the sheep did not give birth to her twin lambs, and the goat did not give birth to her triplet kids. The Anuna, the great gods, did not even know the names Izinakusu, grain, or sheep. There was no muk grain for 30 days, there was no muk grain for 40 days, there was no muk grain for 50 days, there was no small grain, grain from the mountains or grain from the holy habitations. There was no cloth to wear, Utu had not been born, no royal turban was worn. Lord Nijirsi, the precious lord, had not been born. Kakan, the god of wild animals, had not gone out into the barren lands. The people of those days did not know about eating bread. They did not know about wearing clothes. They went about with naked limbs in the land. Like sheep, they ate grass with their mouths and drank water from the ditches. At that time, at the place of the gods' formation, in their own home, on the holy mound, they created sheep and grain, having gathered them in the divine banqueting chamber. The Anuna gods, gods of the holy mound, partook of the bounty of sheep and grain, but were not sated. The Anuna gods of the holy mound partook of the sweet milk of their holy sheepfold, but were not sated. For their own well-being in the holy sheepfold, they gave them to mankind as sustenance. At that time, Enki spoke to Enlil. Father Enlil, now sheep and grain have been created on the holy mound. Let us send them down from the holy mound. Enki and Enlil, having spoken their holy word, sent the sheep and grain down from the holy mound. Sheep, being fenced in by her sheepfold, they gave her grass and herbs generously. For grain, they made her field and gave her the plough, yoke, and team. Sheep standing in her sheepfold was a shepherd of the sheepfolds brimming with charm. Grain standing in her furrow was a beautiful girl radiating charm. Lifting her raised head up from the field, she was suffused with the bounty of heaven. Sheep and grain had a radiant appearance. They brought wealth to the assembly. They brought sustenance to the land. They fulfilled the ordinance of the gods. They filled the storerooms of the land with stock. The barns of the land were heavy with them. When they entered the homes of the poor who crouch in the dust, they brought wealth. Both of them, wherever they directed their steps, added to the riches of the household with their weight. Where they stood, they were satisfying. Where they settled, they were seemly. They gladdened the heart of An and the heart of Enlil. They drank sweet wine. They enjoyed sweet beer. When they had drunk sweet wine and enjoyed sweet beer, they started a quarrel concerning the arable fields. They began a debate in the dining hall. Grain called out to Sheep, "Sister, I am your better. I take precedence over you. I am the glory of the lights of the land. I grant my power to the Sajursaj," a member of the cultic personnel of Inanna mentioned in the last video. "He fills the palace with awe, and people spread his fame to the borders of the land. I am the gift of the Anuna gods. I am central to all princes. After I have conferred my power on the warrior, when he goes to war, he knows no fear, he knows no faltering. I make him leave Lacuna as if to the playing field. I foster neighborliness and friendliness. I sort out quarrels started between neighbors. When I come upon a captive youth and give him his destiny, he forgets his despondent heart, and I release his fetters and shackles. I am Izina Kusu. I am Enlil's daughter. In sheep shacks and milking pens scattered on the high plain, what can you put against me? Answer me what you can reply." Thereupon Sheep answered Grain, "My sister, whatever are you saying? An, king of the gods, made me descend from the holy place, my most precious place. All the yarns of Uttu, the splendor of kingship belong to me. Kakan, king of the mountain, embosses the king's emblems and puts his implements in order. He twists a giant rope against the great peaks of the rebel land. He, Lacuna the sling, the quiver, and the longbows. The watch over the elite troops is mine. Sustenance of the workers in the field is mine. The water skin of cool water and the sandals are mine. Sweet oil, the fragrance of the gods, mixed oil, pressed oil, aromatic oil, cedar oil for offerings are mine. In the gown my cloth of white wool, the king rejoices on his throne. My body glistens on the flesh of the great gods. After the purification priests, the incantation priests, and the bathed priests have dressed themselves in me for my holy lustration, I walk with them to my holy meal. But your harrow, plowshare, binding, and strap are tools that can be utterly destroyed. What can you put against me? Answer me what you can reply. Again Grain addressed Sheep. When the beer has been carefully prepared in the oven, and the mash tended in the oven, Ninkashi, goddess of beer, mixes them for me, while your big billy goats and rams are dispatched for my banquets. On their thick legs are made to stand separate from my produce. Your shepherds on the high plain eye my produce enviously. When I am standing in the furrow in the field, my farmer chases away your herdsmen with his cudgel. Even when they look out for you, from the open country to the hidden places, your fears are not removed from you. Fanged snakes and bandits, the creatures of the desert, want your life on the high plain. Every night your count is made, and your tally stick put into the ground, so your herdsmen can tell people how many ewes there are, and how many young lambs, and how many goats, and how many young kids. When gentle winds blow through the city and strong winds scatter, they build a milking pen for you. But when gentle winds blow through the city and strong winds scatter, I stand up as an equal to a cur. I am Grain. I am born for the warrior. I do not give up the churn, the vat on legs, the adornments of shepherding. Make up your properties. What can you put against me? Answer me what you can reply. Again Sheep answered Grain. You, like holy Anana of heaven, love horses. When a banished enemy, a slave from the mountains, or a laborer with a poor wife and small children comes, bound with his rope of 1 cubit, to the threshing floor, or is taken away from the threshing floor, when his cudgel pounds your face, pounds your mouth as a pestle, lacuna your ears, lacuna, and you are lacuna, around by the south wind and the north wind, the mortar, lacuna, as if it were pumice, it makes your body into flour. When you fill the trough, the baker's assistant mixes you and throws you on the floor, and the baker's girl flattens you out broadly. You are put into the oven, and you are taken out of the oven. When you are put on the table, I am before you. You are behind me. Grain, heed yourself. You too, just like me, are meant to be eaten. At the inspection of your essence, why should it be I who comes second? Is the miller not evil? What can you put against me? Answer me what you can reply. The Grain was hurt in her pride, and hastened for the verdict. Grain answered Sheep. As for you, Ikur is your master, Kakan your herdsman, and the dry land your bed, like fire beaten down, in houses and fields, like small flying birds chased from the door of a house. You are turned into the lame and the weak of the land. Should I really bow my neck before you? You are distributed into various measuring containers. When your innards are taken away by the people in the marketplace, and when your neck is wrapped with your very own loincloth, one man says to another, fill the measuring container with grain for my ewe. Then Enki spoke to Enlil. Father Enlil, sheep and grain should be sisters. They should stand together. Of their threefold metal, lacuna shall not cease. But of the two, grain shall be the greater. Let sheep fall on her knees before grain. Let her kiss the feet of lacuna. From sunrise till sunset, may the name of grain be praised. People should submit to the yoke of grain. Whoever has silver, whoever has jewels, whoever has cattle, whoever has sheep, shall take a seat at the gate of whoever has grain, and shall pass his time there. Dispute spoken between sheep and grain. Sheep is left behind, and grain comes forward. Praise be to Father Enki. Yeah, saying you should eat more grains and less meat, whatever. I guess maybe that's why they depict him. That's why Enki is so heavily associated with being a snake, snaky iconography. He seems pretty nice, but gotta wonder. Okay,